So Darwin's understanding of genetics was basically that, okay, you have two individuals, they have an offspring, the phenotype or the appearance of the offspring is generally some kind of mishmash intermediate between the two parents. That's kind of where, he stopped as far as inheritance, his understanding of inheritance. And of course, since then we've figured out, and this is based largely on Mendel's work first, and that genes and traits are distinct, and traits are transmitted through genes, which are distinct particles of inheritance. So you can have traits maintained over generations. They don't just get washed out by mixing over. Now between Darwin and Evo Devo, there's a lot of fundamental work done. So genetics was figured out, molecular biology, that DNA was the hereditary material and was turned into RNA as protein. That was figured out. And a lot of basic developmental biology was figured out. And all that combined together made Evo Devo possible. So we know now how you make a limb or a hand. We basically know a good, solid outline of the processes needed to make an animal limb or a skeleton or a muscle. So knowing that, we can now kind of work backwards and reverse engineer how that process is tweaked in different animals. Now, what we do in Evo Devo is take that information and see how it's changed in organisms with different limbs, right? So if you know how a limb forms in a mouse, you can ask now, okay, how is that process changed in something like a snake that no longer has limbs? So how do you lose a limb? So how do you just shut down this process genetically and developmentally? You can also ask, okay, if we know how you make a limb in a generic mammal like a mouse, how do you tweak that process to make the limb of something like a bat? So what kind of genetic changes do you need how do you have to change the genome to change development to get a bat limb rather than a mouse limb? So that we know how development works and how genetics works makes it possible that we can test these kinds of hypotheses. So nowadays you can take that knowledge of how a limb develops and you can not only hypothesize about how you might change that limb program to make a bat wing, but you can start to test that. So you can take a mouse and you can tweak those parts of its genome you think might be important and see if that gives you a limb phenotype similar to a bat.